Hello and welcome to a new Oxygen XML webinar. My name is George Bina and I will be your host today. We scheduled a series of 7 webinars every Wednesday, covering different products and technologies that we support in Oxygen. And we already went through the first 2 webinars, covering the new product Oxygen feedback and the HTML5 support in Oxygen XML editor. Today we will focus on JSON and the JSON schema presented by my colleague Octavian Nadolu. He also presented the HTML5 webinar last week. And with our tools, we provide support for XML development, for XML authoring, for collaboration, and for publishing. And Octavian manages the development part for the core XML technologies like schemas, validation, the support for Schematron, Schematron Quickfix, for instance, and also the technologies, these new technologies that they support, like HTML5, JSON, related, let's say, in a way with XML. Okay, so let's move on a bit to some useful information about this webinar. As it is the case with all our webinars, also this webinar will be recorded and the recording will be made available on our website on the event page, as well as on our YouTube channel called Oxygen XML. So you can find there the recording of the webinar. If you have any questions, please ask them at any time during the webinar using the questions panel in the GoToWebinar interface. We'll try to respond to them as you ask them. And also at the end of the webinar, we reserve some time to go through all the questions and respond so that everyone can hear the answer, and maybe Octavian will also show maybe how the answer can be done in Oxygen or things like that, if there is a need to show an example of how related to the answer, let's say. You can also use Twitter if you want, and in that case, please mark your questions with the Oxygen XML hashtag or address them to the Oxygen XML account so we can easily spot them and be able to respond to you. So now, without further ado, let me make Octavian presenter so he can start his presentation. Hi, Octavian.
Hello. Thank you, George. Hello, everyone. So today we'll talk about JSON and JSON schema support. We'll have an overview of the support that we have in Oxygen, and we'll focus mostly on the latest additions on this part, because there are a lot of support on JSON and we don't have enough time. But there are also other presentations that you can check. So this is the agenda of the presentation. First, we'll see the JSON and JSON support, JSON schema support in Oxygen, then the newly added Schematron support for JSON that allows you to create custom rules and use custom message for the validation problems. Then we'll see the conversion between the JSON and the XML. We have a tool that converts XSD to JSON schema, and this allows you, for example, if you have services based on an XSD schema, to use them also using JSON schema. Then an instance generator that allows you to generate multiple instances for testing purposes based on a JSON schema. And the the support to generate a JSON schema from an instance. If you want to start creating a JSON schema and you don't want to start from scratch, then you can generate it from an instance, then you can start developing your schema. So JSON, stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a data representation format, and it's especially used in API configs, but also for storing information. It's lightweight and it's easy to read, especially from JavaScript, because it was made especially for JavaScript. The structure of the JSON document is simple. So you have just these name value pairs, and then you can group them in objects. So you can group multiple name value pair in objects, and you can group multiple values in an array. And this is defined by the ECMA 404 specification, but it's also an ISO specification. Before we go further, let me ask you a question. How do you use JSON? Do you use it, for example, as a data interchange format or for storing data, or maybe you are using related formats, this JSON LD or JSON RPC or other formats, or if you have other way you are using JSON, maybe you can use the questions panel to address this question. I think the poll should be started. So yeah, so you can choose one or more options. So we can discuss them after you choose. I see that most of you are using. There are interesting results, so we'll see at the end. We'll leave this like on 1 minute, and then we'll see the results. So mostly in Oxygen, we allow you to edit these documents, open edit them, and validate them using JSON schema, but also query or transform them in different formats.
I put the results.
Okay,
online.
So I see. Yeah, most of you are using as a data interchange format, which yeah, we expected, but also for storing data. So maybe from a database or from other parts. So
some other ways of using are data for D3 visualizations, for XBRL. We are evolving from XBRL to support JSON 2, and for API documentation.
Great. We intend to add also for Open API support, but in a future version, a better support, let's say. So let's go further with validating JSON documents. So in order to validate a JSON document, you need to check first if it's well-formed and it conforms to the specification, but you can also validate it against a JSON schema that defines the structure of the JSON document, and also against a schematron, which allows you to create your own custom rules that you cannot create using the JSON schema, and we'll discuss them later. Then you can also validate a JSON schema and check that the JSON schema is accordingly to the JSON specification. Let's start with well-formedness. So in order to check if JSON is well-formed, you need to check if it's conformed to the JSON specification, which is ECMA 404, and you can find it on json.org website. You can find a link there. And this is a simple object. For example, you have some name value pairs. Here the value it's a string. Here it's a number. And I have an example here that shows some mistakes that can be made in a JSON document. For example, you forgot if you forgot to add here a column, then this will be reported like a well-formed problem, or here comma after this property, or here this is unexpected because after the last property from an object you don't need to add comma, or here you need to have quotes because this is a string, and here you need to close the object, so you need to have a curly bracket. And I will show you how these problems are reported also in Oxygen. So I have here a document with some persons, and if I remove, for example, the column from here, it will say that it needs to be added after a key. So it's reported and it's highlighted. Then if I remove some codes from here, it also say that it's not correct and needs to be corrected. So these are reported as you type, and the validation is done as you type for all these problems, well-formed problems in JSON. So you don't need to do anything special. Then you can have also a JSON schema. A JSON schema, it's a vocabulary that allows you to specify the structure of the JSON document and can be used to validate and also content completion to edit the JSON documents. JSON schema, it's similar with XML schema or XSD with relaxng and DTD. In fact, it started from the XSD schema, but it's written in JSON. So it's also a JSON document. You see here we have a simple JSON schema that says that the type of the instance should be a string, and this is the string. So this is a simple JSON schema, and I can show you a JSON schema, for example, for the persons file would be something like this. So the type of the schema, the type of the instance should be an object here instead of a string like we had in our example. So a more complex structure, and then you define the properties from the object, and then in the properties for the next type object, and so on. So you can create more complex structure. I will not get into many details about the structure of the schema here. You can have different versions of the schema, and it is recommended to have this schema property added on the first level of the schema and have this definition that says that the current JSON schema, it's a draft 7, for example, here. And in our example, if we switch to Oxygen, we also have this declaration added on the top. Oxygen automatically detects if a JSON schema, if a JSON document is a JSON schema based on this declaration here, and is validated accordingly to the definition, to the draft 7 definition, or you could have also draft 4 or draft 6. These are the supported drafts, supported versions for the JSON schema in Oxygen. We support also draft 8, which is the latest one, but in a compatibility mode to draft 7. So if you are using draft 8 right now, we don't have full support for draft 8. The most used versions, I think, are draft 4 and also draft 7. I have also another question here. We can start the poll. Maybe do you use JSON schema maybe in your for your JSON documents, and what versions you are using? And you can choose no if you are not using, or yes, I'm using draft 4, 6, and 7, the most used one, or yes, I'm using the latest one, or yes, I'm using other versions of JSON schema. So we'll leave also this this for 1 minute to get the answers, and we'll see the results at the end. So a few more seconds. I see that, yeah, most of you are not in JSON schema. I'll show you the results. Did you stop the poll? Okay, so this is the result. So yeah, most of you are not using JSON schema. There are 33% that are using draft 4, 6, or 7. Not too many that are using the latest draft. And there are also some other answers with other versions. Maybe George can help me with
Yes.
with the
So one somebody says Swagger Open API 2.0.
yes.
Another answer is I'm trying out version 8, draft 8 probably. Actually, I find it easier to write schema in RelaxNG and convert my JSON to XML for validation.
Interesting.
We use draft 04. Would like option to control which draft of JSON schema spec when generating from XSD. That's an
that's a request that
yes.
I think we already solved this and we added this support to specify also the version, but it will be available in the next release. So yeah, there are 60% that are not using yet JSON schema. Maybe you'll decide to use it after you'll see all the features and the benefits. So let's discuss about associating a JSON schema. So in order to validate or to edit a document against a JSON schema, a JSON document against a JSON schema, I need to somehow associate and specify what schema should be used. So you can specify this using the schema property, $schema property on the JSON instance, and specify the absolute or relative URI of the JSON schema. Or you can associate it through options. In Oxygen, you can use these validation scenarios that are stored in project, and then you can share the project in order to have also other members from your team access to the same options. So I'll show you, for example, for our JSON document, you can use this associate schema to associate the JSON schema, and then you can select the schema that you want to associate, and you can say you want to use a relative location, and automatically the schema is added, schema associated, it's added here. And in case, for example, you forgot to add the given for the name, it will automatically pop up that there is a problem here. So it will be validated automatically with this schema, and also the content completion will use this schema. In case you don't want to associate the schema to your document, so I can remove this association, you can use this action that we provide in the validate menu. So you can use the validate with, and then select the schema that you want to validate, and each time you want to check the problems, you need to use this action, so it will not do the check automatically. If you want to check these errors automatically as you type, then it is recommended to use an association either in the document or create a validation scenario. And here you need to validate the current document and specify that the associated schema for the document is this personal schema. Then you apply the association, and now each time you are making a modification in the document, you'll get these problems presented, and you'll be notified. And you can also share these options. So if I share this project with you, you'll have the same associations and you'll not need to associate this again. But we'll discuss about this validation also later. You can also validate a JSON schema accordingly to the specification. A JSON schema is also a JSON document, so you need to check if it's well formed, and this is done automatically. But you can also validate it against the specification that is added in this declaration here. So this schema is validated against the draft 7 specification, and if I change it, it will be validated, for example, now against the draft 4 specification. And in case I make modifications in the document, such as, let's say, I have a type that is not correct, it will be automatically presented like a problem. Or if I have a reference that is wrong here, it also present me as a problem. Or I don't know, if I'm using a wrong type, or if I'm using a wrong property that it's unknown, we also detect these problems and we present like an warning. Okay, this will be ignored. We don't know, this version of the schema doesn't know this property from your JSON schema. Then you can also validate a JSON document against Schematron. So in case you want to create specific rules for your documents, rules that check the number of items from a property or from an object, or constraints that, for example, values that depends one on each other, then you cannot do this with the JSON schema, and we provide this support to validate it using Schematron. And I will show you an example here. Let me close these files, and we have this Schematron validation here. We have an example with a library of books. So we have some books with title and authors and information about the authors. And then we created some specific rules for our document. Rules related to the author, for example, and it checks that in the author you have only the name, birth year, and birth and short biography. So only these properties should be presented in the author, and we wanted to have it in this order. Then we check also the publishing year to be greater than the birthday year of the author, or we check the biography to have some content, or we check the end to be a number, and different other checks here. And if I want to apply these checks on my document, I need to create a validation scenario. So I need to use this configure validation scenario. Then in the validation engine, now I will select the JSON validator, JSON Schematron validator, and then here I can choose the Schematron that I want to validate with. And when I apply these rules, I'll get some problems here. For example, here I have note property that is not allowed. So it will show me that only the name, birth year, and biography. So it's the message that I have in Schematron presented here. And I can remove this note, and then the problem will be gone. Another one here that says that are not in this order. So the birthday year is not correct here. I can move it one position up, and now I have it in order. But there is still a problem here because the publishing year, it's should not be greater than the birthday, should be greater than the birthday year. So I need to use another year here. That is correct. Then another problem here, this literature fiction is not in my list. So I need to either use one of the values from this array here, or I can add this value in the array. And now this literature fiction is correct. Then here I use a number, and here I need to have some text, biography information, and now everything is okay. So you can add rules specific. You can have custom messages for your JSON document, rules that you cannot enforce through JSON schema. JSON schema allows you to define the structure and make some constraints related to the values. In order to create these rules, we use XPath. So you can use XPath expressions. You can match the property name and then use XPath expression to check different tests to check, for example, that the age is a number or it's greater than the preceding age, and so on. So you can use XPath expression in order to create these rules in Schematron. Then let's go to the editing JSON part. So in Oxygen, we provide support to editing text, but also in grid mode. We provide an outline view that allows you to see the structure of the document and filter the document. And we also provide content completion based on JSON schema and documentation from the schema, code templates to speed up your work. So let's start with editing modes. So as I told you, we have these two editing modes right now, the text editing mode and the grid. I'll switch to Oxygen and let me open a file. Let's say this with persons. So is that we have syntax highlighting. You can see that we have different colors to visualize very easily the content. Then in case you are using numbers, for example, let's say here it's a different color, or if you are using null as value, you'll get this different syntax highlight, and you can control these colors very easily from options. Then we also have in text this folding support that allows you to easily focus on some parts of the document and collapse the rest. So let's say you want to collapse other folds and focus on this property and start editing this part, and then you'll go to the next part of the document. We have format and indent, so you can make sure that your document is correctly formatted just by using these actions from the toolbar. Then if you want to switch to the grid mode, you can use this button from the bottom of the editor, and then you have this tabular form presented. So you have the persons presented in a tabular form, and then you can reorder them very easily here. You can reorder also the properties, but also the persons, the properties from the person and the persons. You can, of course, edit the content here, and this will be reflected when you switch back to the text page. So this is automatically saved in the document. Then if you want to see the structure of the document, we added this outline view that allows you to see how the properties from the document are are added, and this is synchronized with the editor, and it also handles not well-formed JSON documents. So even if the JSON document is not correct, is not well-formed, it has missing quotes or missing curly brackets, it recovers and presents the structure of the document. It also offers filtering and presents the error marker so we can spot problems. I'll show you how this works. So we see that if I'm going somewhere in the editor, automatically I can see where I am in this outline view. So I can see the tree, but I can also expand this outline and select one property, and it will take me to the corresponding value from the editor. Then I can search or filter. For example, let's say I want to get only the emails from this person. I will type email here and I'll get automatically only the email properties. So, and you have also some options here. So you can synchronize with the editor or not. You can also present these results in a flat matter or directly as a tree. And in case you have errors, let's make an error here, for example, it will be presented here in the outline, so you can easily see that there is a problem here. You have a tooltip that presents the problem. And as I told you, even if the document is not well formed, it automatically recovers. And also in this case, it presents the structure of the document and tries to fix the structure so it can help you to visualize the problems. Then we provide also content completion based on JSON schema, and we provide valid proposals, documentation from the schema, and also code templates that allows you to easily insert new content. I'll show you an example for this. So we can use this document, and we already have an associated schema. So we are associated our schema through a validation scenario. And now if I want to add some in my document, I will get the values from the JSON schema. So if I want to insert, for example, here a property, it will present me the properties that can be inserted in this place. So in my case, I can insert an ID, then I can insert a name, for example, and we see that for the name, it also inserted the family and the given. So it inserted also the required content from the name property. And we can go to our schema just by control click on a property, and we see that in this name we have this family and given that are required, and we can control this from options. So the content that is inserted from the content completion can be controlled from here. So you can say that you want to insert content, but maybe you want to insert also the optional content or the additional content defined in your JSON schema. And you see that also it has some documentation presented here. So this is the documentation from the JSON schema associated with the document. And if I go, let's insert the email, for example, and go to the email, we see that this documentation can be inserted in the title and description properties. Then we have also these code templates. So if I go here, and for example, I use, let's remove this first. I want to insert some content here. I can press Ctrl Shift Space, and I'll get the code templates that are available for the JSON documents. And you can define your own code template. So you can insert, for example, an object here or an array very easily. But if you want to, you have, for example, custom JSON documents and you want to have some custom values inserted very easily, such we have here, for example, a person with all the information about the person or other information. You can define your own. And for this, you need to go to content completion, code templates. And here we have these JSON code templates, and you can easily create new ones using the actions. Let's go further to the querying and transforming part. So we also provide support to query JSON documents using XPath expressions, and you can transform them in Oxygen to different formats using XSLT or xquery. So for the XPath support, you can use the XPath toolbar or the XPath builder view to create an XPath expression and run it over one file or multiple JSON files. We provide also content completion support. So when you are typing the XPath expression, we provide the properties from the document that you want to query, and also functions, XPath functions that you can use to query the documents. I will show you an example. So let me close these files here. I have here some libraries, for example, with some books. And let's consider we want to get, I don't know, the book image description for all the books from this document. So I can run here in the XPath toolbar, let's say book, and I'll get the properties. So I can see that I can select the book, and then I want to get the image, and if I type some letters, it will get me the image property, and then from the image I want to get a description. And then I press enter, I'll get a result here in this view, but this will be highlighted also in the editor, and I can easily go to the result in the editor. So I get all the descriptions of the images, and I can run this also on a project or on multiple files. I can use these files, for example, from the project, and this will open the XPath builder view. Here the scope, you see that is the current selected resources, but you can use the project, or you can use all open files, or even you can create a working set with some resources, custom resources that are not necessarily in the project to run the query on. And then here I can use a similar XPath expression. Let's say you want to get, I don't know, the book description in this case, and then I can run it over all the documents from my folder, and then I can double click on one of them, and it will take me to the result from the document. And it will open the document editor. So you can query one or multiple files using XPath very easily from Oxygen and get the results. You can also export these results if you want to reuse it. Then we also have support to transform using XSLT and xquery, and you can transform JSON documents to different formats. So you can transform it to HTML, to I don't know, to XML, or maybe you can get data from them, just some parts in JSON. You can use also the xquery builder view to run these queries. In order to create an XSLT on xquery for JSON document, you need to use two two functions. So JSON document that allows you to parse a JSON document and then process it, or JSON to XML that allows you to parse a JSON document and convert it to an XML and then process it. I will show you some examples here, some simple examples. I'll close these files first. So we have this books file with this information about the books, with the author, technology, image, publishing year, and so on. And I've created some XSLT, a simple XSLT here that has already associated a scenario. So I already have the scenario created, and this applies on the current document and passes as argument the books.json file that I showed you, and outputs an HTML file. So, and in this document, I just parse the JSON input and match each property, and I just output it in the HTML. And let's see what happens. So I get this ugly HTML with all the text from the JSON. It's not perfect, but it's a step. And then I've done better. Then I outputted an HTML tags with a head and a body and then a table. And in the table, I got all the books from my JSON document. So I use the query sign to get the books. And then for each book, I output the title and the author. And if I run this transformation, I'll get a nicer HTML file, this time with the books and the author, which is better. But we can do even better. So then for each book, we can create a row and then add the image and some anchors and descriptions with a list. So you can get more information from the JSON document and add it in your HTML document. And then if I run this transformation now, I get a nicer HTML5 with links and descriptions, and it looks much better. So you can easily create these HTML results from JSON if you want to process them. I have some example also with xquery. This time it's an xquery that uses also JSON document, but filters the result. So I want to get also only the books with the XML technologies. And I just query and get in a variable the books and then compare the technology of each book and output a JSON document this time. So I'll output a map with the author and the title. And if I run this query over my books JSON, I'll get only the XML books. And I can change it. For example, let's say I want to get the XSL books. I'll run it again and I'll get in the output only the XSL book. So it's very easy to run it, and you can run it on also on multiple files. I have another example here. This time I output an XML, so I can create a different output, and I get the results in an XML manner. Then we have also in Oxygen some tools, some useful tools. One tool that allows you to convert between JSON and XML. That is based on the JSON.org library. We have support to convert from XSD to JSON schema. So if you want to create a service using JSON and you have an XSD, you can easily convert it. Then we have an instance generator that will allow you to generate multiple instances and use random values for your JSON. So this is based on a JSON schema and uses generates the on the JSON schema. Then you can also generate JSON schema from a JSON instance if you want to have like a starting point, you know, like if you have a set of JSON documents and you want to generate, you don't use a JSON schema yet and you want to edit your documents, then you can create this JSON schema, generate it, and then start working, maybe develop more precise JSON schema. Before we continue here, I have another question for you. What tools do you use or maybe intend to use? I added here the tools that we provide, but you can also point also other tools that you use in other application maybe, or from the command line, and you'll need them maybe in the future. So the poll already started, and we'll leave it for a few minutes, so for a few seconds more. So there are for 1 minute maybe. I want to mention that we also offer this JSON to this conversion between JSON and XML also online. So there is an online tool available that you can use. I'll show you the link later. So here's the results. So most of you are using this JSON to XML, JSON conversion between JSON and XML. And I see that you are also using the XSD conversion, and we got some feedback on this part. So I've seen that it's used. And there are a couple of you, 38% in fact, that are using JSON instance generator. This is good. And also the JSON JSON schema is used. I don't know other answers. Maybe George can help.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with JSON myself, so one response is 1/2/3. I'm not sure if this is a tool or it's just like a querying
JSON pointer,
JSON.
yeah.
Yes. Okay, I use some Node.js dedicated libraries. It's another other answer. And I'm supporting validation only. It's another answer.
Okay, so let me tell you about this tool. Maybe some of you are not using and intend to use. So for the JSON to XML conversion, we provide, as I told you, the standard JSON support, JSON conversion that it's also on JSON.org library. And it's a simple conversion. So the property, it's converted to the property name, it's converted to an element, and then its content, it's converted to children. And then we are going further. If you have, for example, arrays, then for each item from the array, an element will be created with that property name. And I will show you in Oxygen how this works very easily. So let me close these files. We have here some books library. So we have this book library of books that we used earlier, and we want to convert it to XML. So you can use this from JSON tools, JSON to XML, and I will set also a name for a different name for the result, and use convert. And we got the XML converted. I wanted to close this, but I cannot because it's the webinar there. Okay, so we can see this side by side here. So we can see that the books property was converted to an element, and then for each book from this array, a book element is created in our XML. It has some, there are some details on these conversions that you need to know. So in case you have, for example, multiple properties on the same level, on the first level, in fact, a JSON root will be created. So we want to generate well-formed JSON documents, and we enforce this JSON root on the result. And also, if you are using arrays and you have unnamed arrays, then we add on the first level an array, and then for the item from the array, because it's an unnamed array, it will add this array property. There are more details on our website about this conversion, and also some examples. You can check them to see if you want to use these conversions. Then we have the XML to JSON conversion, which is similar. So here the element, it will be converted to a property, and the children will be added as a property value. And if it's a complex content, it will generate an object. If you have multiple properties with the same name, it will generate an array. Here, if you have namespaces, for example, or other information, it will just be converted to property values. For example, we have here an attribute, it will just be converted to a property and the value of the property. And I will show you an example also for this. So let's consider one to convert this back, the books result. Can go to tools, JSON tools, and then XML to JSON. I will select the books result, and I will generate the books result JSON, which is this one, which looks similar with the one that we came from. I'll move this here. So we notice that we have this books element generated in a books property, and the value, the content was created inside like a property, and then being multiple elements with the same name, an array is generated. There are also some details here that I want to tell you about. So the first one is about the attribute that that I told you about in that is converted to a property value. And property and value. Then if you have these multiple elements with the same name, it will generate an array with the values from the elements. And then if you have mixed content here in JSON, you cannot have mixed content, let's say. You cannot have a property with the same name on the same level. So if you have text like this and element, then it will generate a hashtag text property with the content. The element will be converted to a property value, and then the next text will generate a hashtag text1 with the value of the text from here. And then if you have another element, and another text will go further with hashtag text2 and so on. So we handle also this situation with mixed content. You can also check all this on our website for more details. And as I told you, we have this online converter that you can use. This is a free tool that you can use to convert from JSON to XML and back very easily. Just paste the content or choose the file here. We have support also for batch conversion, so you can convert multiple files. And for this, you just need to select the files from the project and then this batch converter action from here, and you have different conversions. For example, let's say you want to convert these JSON documents to XML, and then we can convert it and will generate an output with all the XML files that were converted. Next is the XSD to JSON schema converter. This is a tool that we provide like an add-on. So it is installed first time when you are trying to use it. It's installed automatically. You need to just restart the application after we install it. And I'll show you how this works. Let me close these files. So I have here some examples with XSD to JSON. So I have a purchase order schema. It's an XSD schema. And we have some purchase order type with elements defined here, and for each element some types. And I want to use a similar schema for JSON. So I'll just go to JSON tools and then select this JSON to XSD to JSON and select the schema and the result schema. I already have one here. I'll set another name just to be different. So I'll just convert it and it's opened as a result. And we see here that for each type, a definition is created with all the information from the schema. We automatically detect the types from the schema. We match it to the JSON schema. And we also have here a purchase order type, we notice, and then we have the required properties. We have the properties from the purchase order with a ship to, bill to, and items. So it's a similar schema with the one that we have for XML. And here we will also provide some information in our user manual that you need to check. So there are different conversions that we make here, and you can find it here how the simple types are converted in JSON and what types will be, because not all the types from the XSD are available in the JSON representation. So you'll find here more information and the limitations that this conversion has. And of course, if you have feedback, you can point to us. Next, we have the instance generator. So we have support to generate multiple instances from a JSON schema, and you can set the name of the instances. You can set if the values for the properties are random, or the choice strategies are random in case you are using one-off, for example. And I will show you an example also for this action. So I have here the generate JSON schema, the generate sample files here. I have the personal schema here, the one that we used earlier, and go to tools, JSON tools, and generate sample files. And here you just need to select the schema. Then you can also choose to associate the schema in all the instances. You can set an output folder. Then you can set the name of the instances, the number of instances that you want to use. You can use default values for the generated instances. Depending on the type, some default values will be generated, but the same for all the instances. Or you can use random values. Then you can generate also optional properties or additional properties from the schema. And you can specify if a random strategy will be used in case you are using one-off, or the first choice will be selected. And in case the JSON schema is recursive, we automatically go one level, but you can specify to go multiple levels if you want. So here you need to specify a number of levels. And now I generate it, and we notice that we have random content generated in each of those JSON files with different number of items in the array, but all of them it's valid conforming to the JSON schema. So we notice that these documents are perfectly valid. You can find also more information on our website about this tool. Then another tool that we provide is this generate JSON schema from an instance. As I told you, this helps you when you want to have a schema and you want a starting point. We automatically extract formats from JSON instance, and we create also formats in your JSON document. You can choose to restrict the content or add default values. I will show you an example also for this. So we have this person this time, the JSON instance. So it's a personnel with some persons. And I want to have a JSON schema, but I don't know how to create it very easily. So you can choose here the instance and the generated schema. You can set a name, a different name if you want. Then you can choose to match strings, for example, detect if you are using emails in your instance, automatically an email format will be created, or if you are using numbers and so on, Boolean. And I can also restrict additional content and define and make sure that in my schema only these properties that are defined in the instance are allowed. Then I hit generate, and I get this generated schema with the definitions for each of those properties, with the types and reference to other types in case there are property in property objects and so on. If you have complex content there. And we see here, for example, for the email, it automatically said that the format should be email for this property. So this is a very good starting point if you want to use JSON schema. So we got almost at the end. Here will be the conclusion. So we have support for JSON that conforms to the ECMA or ISO specification and ISO specification. We have support to edit, to validate JSON documents against the JSON schema, and also validating using Schematron. You've seen that you can create custom rules using Schematron, more specific for your documents, and you can validate multiple files or only one file. You can edit JSON schema. You can edit also JSON documents based on JSON schema. You can process it also, the JSON documents. You can use XPath, or you can process it as you've seen with XSLT and xquery very easily from Oxygen. And we have some useful tools as you've seen, and we want to provide also more. We have also future plans. Of course, we wait for your feedback. So in the future, we intend to have this diagram, schema diagram, that will allow you to visually edit the diagram and see the structure. We want to add editing support in author mode for JSON, so without seeing the structure, just editing the content. We want to add also quick fixes for the JSON problems, and for example, for the Schematron ones, or for the JSON problems that are reported for the JSON schema validation, and also the YAML support that is, I think it's useful for the JSON part. So we intend to have.
We just pop up a poll, so you can kind of like vote for the features that you want to see in the future in Oxygen. So feel free to select, the most important ones for you, so we can get an idea of what you are looking for.
Yeah, this was George's idea to have this poll. We always get your feedback, and we prioritize our issues depending on the feedback that we get from you. And it's very important to have feedback from our users in order to know what to develop. So I see that most of you are want this JSON diagram support, also JSON in author, which is the quick fixes and the YAML support. So yeah, most of the features are wanted. So we need to start to work on them. So there are a lot. I don't know if there are other. George can.
Yes. Support documentation generation, like you have the XSD documentation
Yeah, we have
functionality.
this. Will be nice. Yeah, we have this on our issue tracker to add this documentation for JSON schema.
Support for JSON LD.
Yes, this would be another idea.
Provide the JavaScript API for your conversion tools. Quick
Yes,
fixes for JSON problems, but you already had this also in as an option here. Transforming JSON with the XSLT xquery.
we have the transforming.
This is already available, and I think you demonstrated this
Yeah,
during the webinar.
I showed earlier. We can you can form it. You can use XSLT and xquery to process JSON documents. So yeah, there are interesting results. So we need to start looking at them. Thank you. There are some resources here that you can check. I also added in the handouts the webinar slides, so you can take these links from there if you want. You can download the slides from the handouts. And thank you very much for your attention. I think I got a little bit over the time. Maybe you
Yes,
can
but we
read
should
some
go
of
through
the
the
questions.
questions still. So if you want, I can
Yes.
go through some of the questions. We received quite a large number of questions, but let's go through them. And I responded to most of them. I still don't know the answers to some of them, and I would like to take this opportunity to ask Octavian for help. So one question was that when opening a JSON schema file in the editor, the green box or the validation that's going on means that the file is well formed, or that is the schema, the JSON schema is JSON schema valid?
Both of them. So we automatically check if it's well formed, but we check also if the JSON schema is according to the JSON schema specification that it's added on the first level. So we validate it against this. So if you add, for example, here a wrong type in your JSON schema, it will show you that it's not correct. So this means that it's validated against JSON schema validator. And what I want to mention here, in case you don't have this declaration, but you consider that this is a JSON schema, this is a JSON schema, you can create a validation scenario. And in the validation scenario, you can specify that this should be validated like JSON schema with the JSON schema validator, and automatically the JSON schema problems will be presented. So even if you don't have this declaration, we allow you to validate it like a JSON schema, but we detect if you have this declaration on the first level.
Okay, so are the sample files available for download?
Not yet. I tried to add it here in the webinar, but we'll add it on the webinar webpage. So you'll get a follow-up email with the recording, and then I will add also the sample files to be downloaded from there.
Yeah, so on our website, there is a page for this event. And on that page, you will be able to find both the recording, I guess also the slides, and also the sample files that Octavian used during the presentation. So that will be helpful if you want to come back to some of those examples that Octavian presented and do them on your own machine. Can you write Schematron rules that would work against both JSON and XML instance documents? Or would you need two different sets of rules? And I responded to this that basically the Schematron that you write it as for the corresponding XML from the conversion between JSON and XML, right, Octavian?
Yes, this is right. So the schematron it's in fact created for the converted XML. So you use like a parser between the validation, the JSON.
Yes. So basically, the answer is yes. The same schematron, you can use it with the JSON, with the data in the JSON format, and also with the same information in XML format, assuming that the XML is the converted JSON.
Yeah, this is interesting. I didn't thought about this to have the same schema for two different types of two different formats.
Can validation scenario perform two steps? First, validate against schema, and probably the JSON schema, and then validate against schematron.
Yes, you can do this. So when you create a validation scenario, you can create. You can say that you want to validate this document with a schema, and you can select here a schema. Let's say this generated schema. Then you can add another unit that will say, okay, validate this as a JSON document, and use a schematron validator, and then you can specify the schematron that you want to use that I used earlier. But in my case, it will not show something very useful because my document doesn't match the schematron.
Yeah,
So
so
yes, you
basically
can.
you can add any number of validation units in a validation scenario, and all of them will be applied by Oxygen.
Executed.
So you can
Yeah.
combine these different validations as you want. Are the JSON schematron tools available to be run also from the command line independently or only within Oxygen?
Yes, right now we do not provide this support to run it from the command line, but we can think to add this in the SDK, maybe distribution, or to run it from.
Actually, we have a scripting license that allows you to run different processing that Oxygen provides, like generating schema documentation, validating data maps, and so on, from a command line. So you can use this on an integration server, for instance, like Jenkins or Travis, and so on. And it will be interesting probably to bring in also some of these JSON tools to be part of that scripting license. So then
Yeah,
when you
this
get
is
the
true.
scripting license, then you have access to more possibilities, let's say, more processing.
Yes, I will add an issue to check this, and yeah, maybe in the future we can also provide these tools.
Is the Schematron support for JSON part of the Schematron standard or independently implemented by Oxygen? So it's actually the Schematron does not make any assumption about the or well, it makes an assumption that the input probably it makes an assumption that the input is XML. But as we mentioned, basically when we validate with Schematron, the rules apply for the same model in XML, basically, like the converted XML document. And it is our implementation that does this mapping back to JSON. So
Yeah, you
this
can create Also, other implementation, you just need to have this conversion and then apply the rules on the converted content.
Do you expect to add author mode in the future? And the answer is yes. As you've seen, we included that also in the poll. So we ask you to vote for them, so we can see, if that's an interesting functionality for you or not. So yes, we plan to add that in the future. Would recommend adding more options to the JSON instance generator with a follow-up, like adding additional properties column false to every object when generating an instance. So
yeah, we need to add some issues. Will be interesting to add more options to this. We didn't had any requests to add more options yet on this generated instance, but will be nice to have more options, of course.
Another question: does the XPath builder works from the JSON instance or from the JSON schema associated with the JSON instance? And my guess was that we detect that from the instance document, but Octavian, you may confirm that.
The XPath support, yes, goes on the instance document. It also runs on a converted converted JSON document. So it runs in fact over a XML document that it's converted from this and just maps the information back to JSON.
Yeah, because basically there's no specification that says how XPath will work on JSON directly, right? So under the hood, we get the XML, the corresponding XML model, and then we apply the XPath on that and map back the results to JSON. But the XPath is applied on an instance, and also use the information from the instance for that content completion that shows you what's available when you press slash, for instance, what you can match and so on. So that is extracted, is inferred from the actual JSON instance document, as we do for XML documents when you use the XPath builder. Can you transform XML to valid JSON? You can transform XML to JSON using XSLT or xquery, as Octavian presented. And we also have the conversion tool that maps between JSON and XML and from XML to JSON. But I'm not sure exactly what you mean valid. Valid according to a schema, to a JSON schema, or to a schematron schema. So the conversion will just provide according to this, the algorithm that converts between them. It's not, it doesn't take into account a specific JSON schema, for instance, and trying to generate something that conforms to that schema. Which versions of Oxygen provide all the JSON support in this briefing?
I think in 22, in Oxygen 22, you'll have all this support, and we added also in 22 that some more support. In Oxygen 23, the latest version, we improved the support that we have in JSON. So 22 or 23 will be
22.1, Octavian.
22.1. Yeah.
The next one, the future one. We also have on our website, when you look at what's new, or there is a release history. So we have the release notes, and then maybe you can go, if you have a browser, Octavian, maybe
yes,
you can go on our website to show that, because then you can see what is new, what was added in each version. Usually there's a JSON category So then you can see what was available for JSON, like here. And then at the top there, you can see a timeline with the other releases. So you can just go to a different release and then see what was added for JSON or for other topic that may interest you, and see what was new in that specific version. So that may help. Could you add an option to control uppercase, lowercase conversion when generating JSON schema from XSD?
I think we already handled this. We had an issue related to this problem that we had some uppercase, lowercase problem when we converted, and we already fixed this problem in Oxygen. So
when you use Oxygen to convert between JSON and XML, is there any way you can map a JSON schema to the corresponding schema to include the schema link in the instance document? So basically, when you convert JSON to XML, you may want that the XML instances contain a reference to some particular XSD schema. That's how I understand the question.
yeah, right now we do not have the support to make modifications in this conversion. Maybe.
No, basically it's just to generate an association with the specific schema in
Yeah,
on the
maybe we
result.
can add like an option for this in the dialog.
Uh, One answer that I provided is that we also have the support for frameworks or document types. So in Oxygen, you can define a new framework that will match the converted documents. And then at that level, at the framework level, you can specify if the document does not have a schema, use this one. So then you can have this association with the schema outside of the document, so at the tool level, at the Oxygen level. Another option is that you can also validate a folder. So on the project view, we have options to directly on a folder to say validate, and then you can validate with the schema, with a specific schema. That may be also useful. Um, I mentioned that we received quite a large number of questions, still going through them. When going from XML to JSON, how are namespaces handled? If, for example, the XML uses multiple namespaces, any?
So we are doing a basic conversion. So we'll just consider the namespaces to be some attributes, and we'll convert them in name value properties. So we'll not handle this part. It's a conversion that will just I don't know, consider these simple values in your document. Because in XML you have a lot of things, and JSON it's more simple, and I think it's hard to do the same things that you are doing in XML in JSON and have this information added, all this information added in the resulting JSON document. For this you need a more complex conversion, maybe depending on the case, on what you want to obtain.
How do you handle XSD choice? This is related to the XSD to JSON schema conversion.
Yes, XSD choice, I think it's converted to one-off, so will be generated one-off in JSON schema, and then specify the definitions between we want to choose.
Okay. Do you support documentation generation similar to the XSD documentation feature that you have? And another related comment was that would be good to see HTML documentation generated from JSON schema.
Yes, we have some. We have an issue related to this support, and we intend to add this support in the future to generate documentation. Will be great, I think. Yeah.
And the last question for today, can you create a package that can be imported in Node.js?
Yes, you can create a package. We also have code templates, I think, for the package. So you can have like a package here, JSON package created with this template. So you just need to create a new JSON document and then edit and add the content here. Maybe you can have also a JSON schema for the JSON package. I don't know if there is such a schema. I didn't check, but or you can generate one to have this package also valid and add constraints on the package.
I spoke too early, so we just received another questions. Any plans to support other conversion XML to JSON? For example, badgerfish conversion.
I don't know this. I need to check these conversions. Right now, we
Yeah,
do not have plans to provide these type of conversions. Maybe we intend to have some conversion maybe in YAML, but I need to check also this.
I
So thank you.
I think that we also have support for external tools. So you can plug into Oxygen different external processes, for instance. And there are, when you build a command line to invoke them, you can use editor variables that will expand to the current file, to the current directory, and so on. So then you can basically construct your external tool to be dynamically generated based on the or to be applied on the current file or the current folder and so on. So it will be rather easy to integrate uh, an external tool, for instance, to do a different conversion from XML to JSON, for instance.
Yeah, but of course I will note this in an issue, and if there are other requests related to this conversion, maybe we'll decide to prioritize this and add also this conversion.
Sure, sure. But I was just saying that it's there's also let's say
An excellent
an
tool.
alternative that's available to our users even now.
Yes. So
So that being said, let me switch back, get a presenter role. And as I mentioned, we run a series of webinars. This was the third, every Wednesday at the same time. Next week, we will cover the Markdown support in Oxygen. And it's not Markdown support in Oxygen XML editor, but Oxygen Markdown support, because this spans also to some other tools like the Web Author, for instance, and probably also on the publishing side a bit. After that, we go back to more XML oriented topics. So we'll have a getting started with data using Oxygen XML editor. That will actually be an interesting topic also for advanced users or more advanced users, because it's always good to see, get some of the best practices to set up a project, getting everything right from the start. Then we cover a bit on the web author, so on the collaboration part and involving other people, not necessarily very technical XML oriented people. So we'll have the webinar on the web author and another one on the Oxygen Content Fusion collaboration platform. You can find additional details also on our website. We have this, so on the company events, you find the main events page where you have also the current event, which will move to past events soon. and then the following webinars and so on. So as Octavian mentioned, here you will find the recording, the slides, and also a link to the sample files soon. So we already went through the questions part. I need to update my last slide, I guess. So thank you, Octavian.
Thank you for staying with us until now, because we got over the time. So thank you everybody for staying with us and for your attention, and bye.
And we hope to see you at our following webinars. Goodbye.
Bye.